Hey, what's going on, guys? We have some breaking news. If you even want to call it breaking news, I want to be very clear. This is not confirmed. This is a very fluid situation. This is highly speculative. But Ariel Helwani dropped a bombshell on the MMA Hour, and it was something that I never even considered. And the second he said it, the second I heard him say it, a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, I could not believe I hadn't thought of this yet. And that is the possibility. Again, this is not confirmed. That is the possibility that the main event of UFC 300 will be Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev. And that's straight up insanity. Now, Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour, I'll link the full episode down in the description, went over basically the four possibilities for the UFC 300 main event. And I thought he was going to go through the usual suspects. We've already heard them time and time again. And three of them were the usual suspects. But the one that he dropped that I never even considered was Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev, which will now be the fourth booking. If you're a newer fan, you don't even realize that. This is the fourth time Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev would have been booked if it gets booked for UFC 300. And it's just all starting to make sense now. The puzzle pieces are starting to fall together. And I'm starting to think back. The video I just recently did, Dana White on the Nelk Boys podcast, Dana White at the Power Slap post-fight event, saying, oh, what a nightmare this is, trying to get this fight together. Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev, boom, light bulb went off in my head. I can't believe I never even considered it. Now, I'm assuming, and I encourage you to go check out the clip of Ariel Helwani. He says, look, this can change. This is a fluid situation. This is not confirmed. But this is kind of what the UFC wants right now. This is the UFC's number one choice for the main event of UFC 300. And it's one of those situations where I truly, I'm just reacting to this news right now. I mean, I just found out, 30 minutes ago or so? My mind is blown. I don't even know how to feel about this fight. But Ariel goes over the possibility of four different main events for UFC 300 and kind of breaks down, based on what he knows and what he thinks, the possibility of them all happening. First off, Conor McGregor's return. I mean, if you've been following my channel at all, I don't even think Conor McGregor is going to fight at UFC 300. I think there's a possibility the UFC could shock us all with it, the way Dana was kind of playing coy and saying, oh, this could be a documentary. I thought, okay, maybe they're trying to get a deal with Conor done. Ariel Helwani believes that's not going to happen. Then he goes to Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad 2, which has been rumored for quite a few months now, but that's going to be a letdown for the majority of fans who are looking for that kind of spectacle main event for UFC 300. Same thing Ariel has said. He said, look, there's a possibility Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad 2 is the main event, but that's not what the UFC is really targeting. Then he discusses a main event that I think really is probably tied for number one, but Ariel thinks this is in second place. But that is Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya for the middleweight title. I still think there's a very good possibility that happens at UFC 300, but he says that's not what the UFC wants. My guess is behind the scenes, the UFC is negotiating with a bunch of different people. They're calling up Jon Jones, as I put in my other video, asking Jon Jones to headline. But Ariel said, based on the people he's talked to and kind of his understanding, and again, I have to just beat this into your head. This is not confirmed, okay? We're just talking about a very speculative main event for UFC 300, which, by the way, I believe it will be announced in the next 2 to 3 days because I looked on ESPN's website. They have a UFC 300 press conference scheduled for Friday at 7 p.m. I'm assuming that's Eastern time. But the last main event that Ariel discusses is Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev, presumably, almost definitely, for the welterweight title. Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. And my initial reaction was, holy crap, that would come out of left field. Nobody has been talking about that possibility. Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev. We've been talking about Khamzat potentially getting the shot against DDP. Khamzat came out recently and talked about he wanted to fight at 300. And he was promised a title shot by the UFC. So everyone was saying, oh, he doesn't deserve it at middleweight. It's going to be really funny. One of the things I first thought of when I saw this news, if it does happen, if this does come to fruition, which honestly, now that Ariel reported it, it may not come to fruition. Well, he didn't really report it as happening. He reported it as a possibility. So I don't see how he could potentially be wrong on that. But when people were discussing DDP versus Khamzat Chimaev, they were adamant. Khamzat Chimaev doesn't deserve a title shot. He only beat up a blown up middleweight on short notice, which isn't his fault. By no means is his fault at all. But now at the possibility, and I haven't seen this reaction yet, but I expect to see this reaction. Now at the possibility of Khamzat Chimaev leapfrogging Bilal Muhammad, I guarantee those same people will twist themselves into pretzels to justify Khamzat skipping over Bilal Muhammad. And in this situation, I do understand there are some arguments that you can make in favor of Khamzat getting the title shot, but I just feel like the arguments you can make against it are so much more concrete in my opinion. But the fight itself would be crazy. Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev, I must admit, I am always, people always confuse my opinion. I am always in favor of a meritocracy. I always want a meritocracy in every single case, no matter what. That doesn't mean I can't like a fight that is not merit-based. So Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev, I would be hyped for. I would be pumped for. It would be an incredible main event. But that doesn't mean I won't be disappointed that we're not following a meritocracy, which I know we don't always. But in this case, it's like you already gave Colby Covington an undeserved title shot. Colby Covington, no ranked wins, who are currently ranked in the top 15. Hadn't fought in 2 years, basically, at that point, or a little over a year, or basically a year and a half. And you gave Colby an undeserved title shot. Meanwhile, Bilal Muhammad's on a 10-fight unbeaten streak. And now you're going to potentially skip over Bilal Muhammad again for Khamzat Chimaev. I love the fight. I'm hyped for the fight. I think it's an incredible fight. It's the 4th time it's been booked. In case you guys didn't know, let's go over that first. In case you guys didn't know, Khamzat Chimaev versus Leon Edwards was originally booked for December of 2020. Okay? Leon Edwards was ranked in the top 5, I believe, at the time. Khamzat Chimaev was unranked. The UFC wanted to catapult Khamzat into a title shot. They booked him against Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards didn't want the fight at first. He was turning it down. They yanked Leon Edwards from the rankings. Finally, Leon accepted it. They put him back in the rankings. Now, when December came along, it was probably like a month before, or no, probably 2 weeks before, both Leon Edwards and Khamzat Chimaev got sick. So essentially, they both pulled out of the fight. The fight was rebooked for late January. I believe it was January 20th, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, January 20th. Now, January 20th date came along. Khamzat Chimaev had lingering issues from being sick in December. Khamzat Chimaev had to pull out again. So instead of giving Leon a replacement opponent, they rebooked it for March of 2021 now. So they booked it for December of 2020, January of 2021, now March of 2021, same fight. They wanted to keep this fight. They desperately wanted to keep this fight together. Khamzat Chimaev still suffering from lingering effects. He pulls out of the March event. That's when Bilal Muhammad steps in on like a month's notice to fight Leon Edwards. And that's when you get Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad too. Inevitably, their paths never crossed since then. You know, it's been now 3 years. Their path has never crossed. And obviously, Leon Edwards has gone on to win the title, beat Kamaru Usman, beat him again, and then recently beat Colby Covington. Meanwhile, Khamzat Chimaev has had such a weird career path since then. So he loses out on the 3 fights against Leon Edwards. Then he gets his kind of debut into the top 15 against Li Jingliang. Then he beats Gilbert Burns at UFC 273, his last welterweight fight. The last fight where he makes the welterweight weight limit. And after he beats Gilbert Burns, it's a foregone conclusion he's going to fight Kamaru Usman, basically. But that summer, they had already booked Kamaru Usman, Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards knocks out Kamaru Usman. There's going to be an immediate rematch. So in the meantime, the UFC wants to keep Khamzat busy. They book him against Nate Diaz. Khamzat misses weight. They reshuffle the whole card around. Khamzat ends up fighting Kevin Holland at a catchweight, and then he moves up to middleweight afterwards. And he fights Kamaru Usman on short notice. Was supposed to fight Paulo Costa, and ends up fighting Kamaru Usman on short notice. Beats him at middleweight. So you have this really weird situation where Khamzat now hasn't made weight since all the way back at UFC 273, which is April of 2022. Does not have a win at welterweight since April of 2022. So we're talking 2 years since he won a fight in the weight class. And now we're going to give him a title shot, basically just based off star power. I do understand how you can say, okay, well, he beat Gilbert Burns. You know, he was kind of deserving of the title shot at that point. He didn't get it. So maybe you can say, oh, we're just righting it wrong. Also, I think people are going to say, well, Kamaru Usman's a welterweight. He beat Kamaru Usman. So that could justify a title shot. I think a lot of people are going to kind of use that argument. And I am sympathetic to it. I do think there is a case to be made. Gilbert Burns, Kamaru Usman, give him the title shot because he beat Kamaru Usman, a former dominant welterweight champion. But beating Kamaru Usman on short notice at a different weight class, I just have an issue with. I thought the win over Kamaru Usman, considering it is at 185, I think it's worth more at 185, to be honest. And I know people say, oh, well, Kamaru's at 170. Well, it doesn't matter. They weighed in at 185. So it's a little bit of a weird situation. But what a storyline this would be. Fourth time's the charm. I would worry if this fight does get booked. Can Khamzat Chimaev make weight? Khamzat Chimaev is massive. He looks huge at middleweight. He hasn't made weight at 170 since 2022, early 2022. Can he make weight? I don't know if I would trust a UFC 300 main event on Khamzat Chimaev making weight, because if Khamzat misses weight, my guess is Leon Edwards turns down the fight. And then even if Leon doesn't turn down the fight, then the title's not on the line. Then if Khamzat wins, the division is just in complete disarray. So this is a risky main event if the UFC does, in fact, book it. But man, would it be crazy. Leon Edwards, decent cardio, not the greatest of cardio, very good striking, and his grappling is evolving fight to fight. I mean, look at the way he was just out-grappling Colby Covington in the last fight at UFC 296. Meanwhile, you have Khamzat Chimaev literally ragdolling Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman was ragdolling Leon Edwards in their second fight. Not the second title fight, the first title fight, but the second fight overall in the UFC. Khamzat Chimaev is going to have a massive grappling advantage over Leon Edwards. And it's all going to come down to cardio, because Khamzat hasn't been known for the best cardio, especially since he got sick. There was some, speculation maybe that there's issue with his lungs, and that's why his cardio isn't as good. But he was also injured in the Kamaru Usman fight, so I give him a little bit of a break. But there's no doubt in my mind Khamzat Chimaev is going to ragdoll Leon Edwards in the first round. It's just a matter of if Leon Edwards survives the grappling of Khamzat Chimaev, can he outstrike him in the later rounds and just beat him up, maybe even finish a gassed Khamzat Chimaev in the later rounds? Because Khamzat Chimaev has not gone 5 rounds in the UFC ever. So I wish the Gilbert Burns fight was 5 rounds. So it's a very intriguing fight, but also you have the question mark, can Khamzat Chimaev get into the United States? Ariel Helwani said that's kind of the holdup. That's why Dana White's like, well, if you knew what we were going on behind the scenes, blah, 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 you would know, could be a documentary made about it. Ariel is speculating that it's Khamzat Chimaev's visa issues. Now, Khamzat Chimaev's visa issues would be because we don't have confirmation. It's never been confirmed. This is one of those kind of stories that has been regurgitated so many times that it sounds credible. But to be honest, other than pure speculation, we don't know that Khamzat Chimaev can't get into the United States. We've never had official confirmation on that. I believe it's partially true. It could be the fact that he's tied to a Russian warlord. He's a good friend. He could be on the no-fly list to the United States. But what I find weird about that, and again, obviously different countries have different rules, Khamzat Chimaev was able to get into the UK. And maybe I've missed something. Maybe he's been to the United States, but it also could be things about work visas and stuff like that. So that could be the one holdup. It could be the holdup. Khamzat can't get into it. And somebody even speculated this in the Discord. I can't remember who it was. What if Dana White was talking about everything you thought you know about UFC 300 could change? What if he uprooted it to the UK? What if he uprooted it to Abu Dhabi and held UFC 300 somewhere across the world instead of in the United States, just so he could have Khamzat Chimaev headline? I think that's highly unlikely. I think they want to do it in Vegas. I think they will keep it in Vegas. But that is an interesting notion just to think of. That'd be absolute insanity. And I think, honestly, Ariel Helwani now spoiled the party again. And I'm not blaming Ariel Helwani. I think Ariel Helwani should continue to do what he's doing. But the fact that Ariel kind of broke this news as a possibility, he got rid of the shock value of Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev, I already feel like Dana White's immediately going in a different direction. He's already pulled the plug. Because what you guys have to realize, and I've talked about this in other videos, Dana hates Ariel Helwani so much, he intentionally tries to discredit every bit of news Ariel reports in a way to just make Ariel look unreliable, so people think, oh, Ariel doesn't know what he's talking about. So I know this sounds crazy when Ariel has kind of hinted at it before. Oh, Ariel has such a big ego. He thinks Dana White's making news around him. Dana White is that petty. If Ariel reports something, Dana White will intentionally change the UFC's plans just to make Ariel look like an absolute fool, because he still holds a grudge over the UFC 200 announcement, where it's a lot more complicated than this. But essentially, Ariel Helwani broke the news that Brock Lesnar was going to return at UFC 200. UFC wanted that as shock value for the fans. I think they wanted Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev as shock value. Now it's kind of lost some of its luster, but also Ariel could help UFC here because it could put out feelers. And from everything I've seen, I haven't seen a full reaction yet. I've just put out a couple tweets. I've seen a couple reactions. It seems like people are in love with Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev. And again, even though it's not the fight that I 100% believe in based on meritocracy, I can't hate it. I can't hate on this fight. I think it's an incredible matchup. I think it's an incredible style matchup. I think it's an incredible story considering they were supposed to fight 3-4 years ago. And to see it happen now for a belt, it would be absolute insanity, but you have to feel for Belal Muhammad. 10-fight unbeaten streak, promised a title shot, and now not getting it. And also, it's going to sound crazy coming from me. I've always been advocating for a meritocracy. I've been advocating Belal Muhammad should get the shot that he worked for. He's in his mid-30s. He's heading towards a decline in the next 2 years. Now we're making him sit out when he's earned his title shot because we don't like him or you guys don't like him, or the UFC doesn't like him just because, he's not going to sell 1 million pay-per-view buys. I think that's despicable. And I hate to say it, if Khamzat goes out there and beats Leon Edwards, by the way, early prediction, very, very early prediction for an unconfirmed fight, I'm going Khamzat Chimaev. But if Khamzat Chimaev wins, I hate to even admit this out loud. If Khamzat Chimaev wins, and this is me showing a bit of a hypocrisy here, I need Khamzat Chimaev, Shavkat Rakhmonov. If you've been watching this channel since its inception, when they were both unranked, the fight I wanted more than anything, one day, some way, somehow. I put it on my list of top fights the UFC needs to make when I released that video earlier this year. I need Khamzat Chimaev versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. So what does Belal Muhammad do in the meantime? Maybe book Khamzat. If they book Leon Edwards versus Khamzat, maybe co-main event, Shavkat versus Belal for #1 contender, even though Belal's already earned his shot. I mean, that would be a banger of a fight. But the UFC already has the card filled out. I doubt they do that. So it's crazy. The situation is still fluid. I think there's a real good possibility. And honestly, I'm going to stick to my prediction that we get Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. I think there's going to be too many hurdles with Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev. And I think DDP can come to terms with a new contract with the UFC. I think Israel Adesanya has been hinting and hinting. I think he wants the title shot. I think he wants to return sooner rather than later. This is going to be one of his longer layoffs, which is absolutely crazy. Not really that long, but you get my point. And I think inevitably it's probably Adesanya getting the title shot against Dricus Du Plessis. But imagine they book both those for the card. I mean, imagine how crazy that would be. Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev, Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya on UFC 300. I don't want to hear anyone complaining about UFC 300, even if they book Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev as the main event. I told you guys, you can't judge it before we have the main event announced. But I do believe the announcement will come in the next 48 hours. There's a press conference scheduled for Friday. I think we will get the main event before Friday. And I don't know who's going to be at the press conference because it's labeled as a Q&A. So it could be maybe it's the main event fighter is going to be there. I don't know. It all depends on what the UFC inevitably goes with as the main event. But Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev is completely out of left field. I would love the fight, even though I hate that it's not merit-based, even though I do think you can make a slight argument for it. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.